What is up, guys? Team Feels here with another video, and I went to locals today and did pretty darn well, not gonna lie. Managed to squeeze in another top 4. This time we had a lot more people. I think there was at least 24, but I think it might have been more than that. I could be incorrect, but I know that it was at least 24, because I know we had like 12 tables running at the minimum. I just didn't count to what table it went to, but I know that there was pairings at least up to table 11 and 12. So it was very good local. It was 5 rounds. I ended up going 4-1. Not too bad of a haul, honestly. It was pretty good. Round 1 I played against Pure Leerlusk, and I ended up 2-0ing that. Round 2 I played against Invoke Dogmatica. I also 2-0'd that. Round 3 I lost to an Invoke Dogmatica player. Round 4, I beat Phantom Knights in game 3, and then the last round, I 2-0'd Dinosaurs. So I played against all decks that are fairly relevant and seeing play, which is good. There was a decent amount of Sword Soul representation at the local, but I just didn't end up playing against any of them. Not necessarily a bad thing. There's also a few striker players too. Just a pretty good mix overall, but it was a very good local. I enjoyed it. I think the finish was 3rd, so the people who got 1st and 2nd, they actually drew in the final round. So they got 1st and 2nd, then I got 3rd. So if one of them had won or lost, I probably would have ended up getting 2nd because of the way their tiebreakers were going to come out. But regardless, it still worked out for me. Still got a decent amount of prize packs and had quite a bit of fun. But as you can see on your screen, I opted to play what I consider to be, at least in the current state of the meta, my version of Old Reliable. I can take Dragon Link to a tournament and do fairly decent with it all the time, just because the deck has such a high ceiling and it can play through so many different things. Very fun, very enjoyable. So before we jump into the deck profile, if you guys are not subscribed already, make sure you go ahead and smash that subscribe button, turn the notification bell on, and obviously give the video a thumbs up. It's always very helpful, and it helps the channel keep growing and staying alive, and that is always something that we love to see. But without further ado, let's hop right on into my Dragon Link deck profile. Alrighty, so per usual, we're going to be starting with our main deck. And I want to preface this by saying I played 45 cards. I thought that 45 was actually fairly decent considering some of the things I'm playing in here. Some bricks that I didn't want to necessarily draw into. So 45 was actually phenomenal. I didn't have too many issues with it. I didn't really brick a lot. I think I bricked in that round 3 when I lost to Invoke Dogmatica. It was just bad hands. Like it's gonna happen, but it obviously sucks when it does. But let's go ahead and take a look at the lineup of cards that I played. So we'll start with the Rockets, which of course most people would guess that we are playing 3 copies of Rocket Tracer. The special summon effect obviously came up a lot. This was absolutely insane. So I did definitely get my fair share of usage out of our Rocket Tracer, and I think that the Rocket Tracer is one of the reasons that I did so well. Like, this card is just insane, absolutely insane. Whether I drew it in my opening hand, or I searched it, or I summoned it off of a quick launch, it just put in all of the work necessary to help me push forward to get my cards out that will negate my opponent's cards. Especially, and one of the other things I want to talk about with Rocket Tracer, giving you access to the Chaos Ruler Synchro Monster, is like, that card alone, it won me so many games today resolving that. If my opponent didn't like impermit, Veiler it, or something like that, I actually won every single game that card resolved on. So this card being able to make that is really all the more reason to be playing 3 of it. Then I played 2 copies of Rocket Synchron. This was also fairly integral to my strategy. There were a few times where I normal summoned this and just brought back something like an Absorouter or an Octovision and just, like, you know, made a quick level 8 synchro, and that was all I needed to really secure a game. So the Rocket Synchron was extremely useful. Don't sleep on that card. Like, that card, you should definitely be playing at least 2 of it. It's that good. Then for the last Rocket card that we played, of course, the one Recharger. I drew a Recharger, I think, 3 games today. Not like full matches, but like in 3 individual games, I drew this card, and I was still able to combo off regardless of the fact that I drew it. Like it's just like, obviously I couldn't do as much as I wanted to, but I was able to extend far enough and put up a board that my opponent couldn't break through. So the recharger was still good, still served its purpose. I just drew it a few times and wish I hadn't drawn it. Then this is also kind of with the rocket engine, but 2 Absolrouter, because with the Absolrouter just being able to search for your rocket cards, why wouldn't you play this? It's just such a powerful card, being able to grab you a tracer, or in my case, a lot of times I actually did grab Rocket Synchron off of this. There was a hand where I opened up Router and Ravine, so I just pitched the Router from hand to dump something, and then I searched the Synchron. So that was actually really good. So Router, for that reason, is very, very good. Like, the card just it helps you push your plays forward. That's the best way I can really describe what the card does so well. Then we played 3 copies of Noctovision. Whenever I drew this card and was able to resolve it, I was having a good time playing. Let me tell you, this card helped chain block Striker Dragon a few times. Some guy actually opted to negate my Noctovision, the in-hand effect, and I was like, okay, like that's fine. I'm still getting the search off of my Striker Dragon for the field spell, and then I just proceeded to set up full combo, and he couldn't play the game. So the Noctovision still helped me in that manner. Then we played 3 copies of Starly's Seafort. This was decent. I actually never resolved the graveyard effect to banish and add back. That actually never came up, which surprised me. And I only resolved the tribute effect of Seafort successfully once. I tried to resolve it 2 other times, and it got negated the 2 other times. So the fact that I only resolved this card once and I still managed to go X1 was pretty impressive, because usually you need to resolve that Seafort a lot more than that to do well. Next cards for kind of the Chaos Engine here, of course, the Wyver Burster and Collapse Serpent. These cards came in clutch. The only problem was that I drew them so much, and I actually only resolved Chaos Space twice today, 2 or 3 times, which is kind of sad. Like, I did very, very well considering the hands that I drew, but it doesn't surprise me that like I drew bad hands, because I have a very terrible track record of drawing terrible hands. That's why I try and just play decks that are consistent. That way they don't ever break on me. So the Wyver Burst and Collapse Serpent, though, definitely came in clutch, helped me save my normal summon for later in my combos. Then I played, of course, the Levianeer, and I also played the Chaos Emperor Pendulum Monster. And let me tell you something, okay? I think I resolved Levianeer. Well, I tried to resolve it once, and I got hit with a Fog Blade. It was against Phantom Knights. Card got hit with a Fog Blade. Other than that, I didn't summon Levianeer out once the entire day. It did not come out once. I did not see it. I didn't have a point where I had it in my hand or searched it. Nothing. Like, it did not come up. On the other hand, though, the Chaos Emperor Pendulum Monster came up a lot. This card is absolutely busted. I just have to say, I was very much so against playing this card for a very long time. After today, I completely take that back, and I will never ever play Dragon Link without this card. This card is absolutely nuts. You need to be playing this card because it nets you so much advantage. I just really am now a firm believer of playing this card in the deck. I contemplated playing more, but you really just don't have the room to play more, and you really only need one because it recurs itself by putting itself back into the deck. And then the last card, which is kind of part of the Chaos Engine, is 1 Omni Dragon Brotar. Obviously, we all know that Brotar is a great card. However, today, I didn't see this card once. It just didn't come up. There were so many other things that I did that were a lot more relevant, and the Brotar just was never something that I needed. Next card, however, I did resolve a few times, and every time I did, my opponent actually scooped. I think I resolved it like 3 or 4 times, and every single time my opponent's just like, yep, next game. And that is the 1 Chamber Dragon Maid. There's a lot of times where I tribute my spheres, and then I would summon the Chamber Dragon Maid off of the spheres effect, and I would search for tidying, and my opponent would just scoop directly after that because they didn't have any way of playing through the following turn. So the Dragon Maid, very, very helpful. Not too much else to say. I never banished Tiding from grave to summon this back. Because like my opponent's just scooped, so there's no point to ever do that. And I never did the lucky mill off of the Chaos Ruler to go ahead and bring it back. So that's okay though. And the last portion of the Dragon Engine in my deck is 1 black metal and 1 darkness metal. This was good. Well, the black metal wasn't good. The darkness metal, I drew this card a few times, and it definitely helped. The black metal, I only resolved once. I linked it off for the striker and just kind of, you know, did the standard play from there. But it wasn't anything crazy. I obviously want to keep the engine because it's a really good setup. I almost want to play another black metal dragon, but I don't really know if there's something that in particular I would like to remove to do so. Moving on to the hand traps, though. I had a very, I want to call it an odd hand trap ratio, but realistically, I don't think it's that odd after playing today. I think it's actually pretty decent. So I played 2 Drolls, 2 Nibirus, 3 Gammas, and 1 Driver. A lot of people know that I'm kind of a stickler for, you know, ratios staying similar amongst hand traps. I don't really like to play, you know, a few hand traps at 3 and then play a few hand traps at 2. And today I said, you know, I'm like, I don't want to go over 45 cards. I think 45 cards is perfectly fine. And the result was me having to play 2 Droll, 2 Nibiru, and 3 Gamma and 1 Driver in the main deck. So I strayed from my normal, and it worked very, very well. I don't think I resolved Droll once, which is okay. Like, I didn't need to resolve the Droll at any point. There were times where I wish I had it, obviously, but the times that I did have it in hand, it actually wasn't relevant. So that was unfortunate, but it happens. The Nibiru, however, came up almost every single round, I think. Card's just ridiculously good. Just so good right now. It's the reason that I won the Lyralust matchup. It's the reason that I won the Phantom Knights matchup. Like, Nibiru did absolutely so much work for me. And then the Gamma, let me just say, like, this card, when it goes off, it goes off. My opponent tried to use a Scythe effect to lock me out of the extra deck after popping my Nibiru with DPE, and I just negated the Scythe with the Gamma, made the Chaos Ruler, and he looked at his board and he knew he couldn't do anything, so he just scooped. Like, this is just crazy, like absolutely crazy. And he had no cards in hand either. He just completely expended all of his resources because I Nibiru'd him, so that makes it even better. In the last portion of the monsters in the main deck, we have 1 Dasher, 1 Celestial, and then I'll just include the 3 Fusion Destinies as part of this. I did play the DPE engine. This is the bricks that I was talking about that I didn't want to draw. There are actually 2 games today where on my Chaos Ruler mill, I milled either one or both of these. One of the times I added the Dasher back. The time that I milled both, I obviously just grabbed something else because the engine was dead. Like, it just wasn't going to do anything. So this engine, though, was fantastic. There were a few times where I had to make a Verte to go ahead and make the DPE just because I had the resources to do so, and I didn't have any other plays that seemed logical or workable, so I did that. The draw off the Celestial is fantastic, absolutely fantastic, so definitely keep in mind that the Celestial draw is very important. And I mean, there's not much else to say about this engine. Like, this engine is just, it is what it is. It's just really good. Moving on to the spells, though. Played 3 Chaos Space. As I said, I only resolved this card like 3 times today, which is kind of sad because I would have liked to resolve it every single game, but I didn't. And actually, I resolved it twice and it got negated once. I activated it 3 times, but it only went through twice. And the 2 times that it did go through, it was fantastic. The 1 time that it didn't go through, I think I just scooped. I think that was the round 3 against the Dogmatic Invoke player that I lost. My only loss for the day. Like, when it got negated, I didn't have any other plays, so I just had to, you know, pick up my cards and just basically move on to the next one. Then we have 3 copies of Quick Launch. The Quick Launch was fantastic. I drew the card a few times, resolved it a few times. I don't remember. I resolved this card at least 3 times today. every single time that I played it, my opponent, like, I watched their eyes roll into the back of their head because they were so frustrated with the fact that I opened the quick launch. You know, you're not expending your normal summon, you're literally just getting a free special summon and starting your Dragon Link combo. Like, that's pretty good. Quick launch alone is a 1 negation with Warlord Savage. And the last 2 spells, 1 Ravine and 1 Boot Sector. I used these cards in excess today. The Boot Sector especially, I can't even count how many times I used Boot Sector's effect. And let me tell you, it was absolutely fantastic. And then the Ravine also came in clutch. I only searched it off of Romulus once, which is kind of surprising because I'm used to searching it all the time, but I actually didn't need it that much today because of the way that my hand kind of formed itself. So those are all the spells, though. Moving on to the traps, we just play 2 Dragon Maid Tidying. I don't play any other traps. I'm not playing like Rivalry or anything like that. I'm not playing Imperms. It's literally just the 2 Tidying, and it was more than helpful. I think I only resolved it like 2 or 3 times, but when I did, my opponent was just like, yeah, like I can't play through that. So pretty good stuff. But that is the entirety for the main deck. Like I said, 45 cards. We're gonna go ahead and hop on over to the extra deck so I can talk about my choices there. Alrighty, so now we're on to the extra deck portion, and the extra deck, in like my personal view, is probably as standard as a Dragon Link extra deck should look nowadays. There is like a few things that I will discuss a little more in depth, but I'm not going to, you know, discuss nearly as in depth as the main deck. That's for sure. So the Link ones, Striker Dragon and Pisti. Obviously, these are the two Link ones that we play. The one problem that I have is I never resolved Pisti at all today. I actually never had a reason to make Pisti at all today. The card did not come up. It was not like even close to relevant whatsoever. By the end of the tournament, I actually wanted to play something else rather than Pisti. Like, it was that bad. So, like, don't get me wrong, the card is good, but today it was really useless, like absolutely useless. Striker Dragon, however, was an absolute MVP. Grabbing Boot Sector launch was so good. Like, it was so ridiculously powerful. So Striker Dragon, 10 out of 10 card. Pisti for today, 0 out of 10. Moving on to the Link 2s, play 1 Verte, 1 IP, 1 Romulus, 1 Quad Boral, and 2 Spheres. So I'll talk about each of these and kind of go over the logistics that I found as far as like what was useful and what wasn't useful. And so the Verte was extremely useful, as I'm sure many people could guess, with the DPE engine. Came up a few times where I made it and my opponent just like, you know, they Nibiru'd my board, and then I was still able to play, and then I make the Verte, and they're like, oh my god, like, of course he can still keep playing. So when this card gets banned in the upcoming ban list, which I'm sure it will, we won't have to worry about stuff like that, but then I'll just top deck the Fusion Destiny instead, and that's even better. But the IP Masquerena, didn't make this card once, didn't ever have the urge to make it. Card is good, obviously, but I personally had no point where I was like, oh, you know, IP would really be helpful right now. The Romulus was okay. I think I summoned it twice to search for a Ravine. At least once, maybe twice. And like the Ravine helped in that scenario. So the Romulus wasn't bad. Wasn't anything fantastic, but it was decent. The Quad Boral was like Quad Boral is a really good card, don't get me wrong, but I only summoned it once, and the one time I summoned it, like, my turn didn't go fantastic afterwards, but I was still able to set up a board that he couldn't play through because he only had 1 card in hand. So like that was obviously good for me. So the Quad Boral was decent, but nothing crazy. And then the Sphere, on the other hand, this card, absolutely insane. There were so many boards where I ended on this, and my opponent was just like, oh, well, I guess I'm screwed. Like, I can't do anything. And then you summon the Chambered Dragon Maid off of it, you search for Tidying, and then your following turn is obviously even better because you can basically set up another board with multiple negations and interruptions. So those are the Link 2s. The only Link 3 that we played was Unicorn, and I never made it. Not a single time. Didn't make this card once today. I really had such an odd tournament. There were so many cards that I thought were going to be useful that weren't useful at all or didn't even get played at all. And Unicorn was one of them. I thought for sure I'd make it, but apparently not. Link Force, 1 access code, 1 Boral Sword. In theory, cards are absolutely fantastic. This is going to really shock everyone. I actually never made either of these cards today. Like, legitimately, I did not make either of these cards. And I didn't use either of their effects. Like, they didn't hit the field once. It was about as useless as you can get. Like, honestly, these cards were not played. Like, they actually did not see the light of day. It didn't happen. So, in theory, fantastic cards. Today, they just did absolutely nothing. Synchro Monsters, 1 Borload Savage, 1 Chaos Ruler, and 1 Hot Red. So the Hot Red and the Chaos Ruler were probably the 2 other MVPs today outside of the Heavenly Spheres and the Striker Dragon. These cards, like the Archfiend and the Chaos Ruler, put in so much work for me. And then we get to our buddy Borload Savage Dragon, which is one of my favorite Synchro cards of all time. Like, the card is just amazing. It's so amazing. But unfortunately for Borload Savage Dragon, I only summoned him once today. And when he was summoned, my opponent Nibiru'd me. So it did not even matter. I summoned the Savage once. He chained the Nibiru to the effect activation, and my Savage Dragon was then deemed completely and totally useless. But as I said, the Chaos Ruler and the Archfiend were above and beyond phenomenal. Cards did so much. The summon back off of the Hot Red was amazing, and then obviously the secondary special summon effect of Chaos Ruler was also fantastic too. Putting another 3K monster back on the board is pretty good. So those are all the Synchro Monsters that I played. And lastly, the card that I probably summoned the 3rd most out of the entire extra deck behind Striker Dragon and Heavenly Spheres was our DPE, which we all knew was here because I showed the engine throughout the course of the profile. The DPE was absolutely clutch, and when there was a time that my hand was completely empty, I would just use, the Celestial and the Dasher to draw to. But this card is just absolutely busted. Like, it's so good. This card is just so good. So definitely play the DPE engine if you're playing this deck, because it really helps excel the deck's boards through the roof more so than they were before, which is really neat. But that's the entire extra deck. We're gonna go ahead and look at the side deck to see how it was kind of combating the meta to ensure that because I could just break whatever board was in front of me. All right, so side deck time, obviously, as we all know, side deck time means it is the last portion of the video where we discuss how I counter the meta. And today we had quite the interesting side deck, at least in my opinion. Some changes will definitely be made, though. There were some things where I was like, wow, I wish I had this card or that card, and it would have been extremely helpful. But what we have here was pretty darn good still. So we played some more hand traps. I should probably point that out first. Played 2 Lancia, 2 Token Collector, 1 Nibiru, and 1 Droll. So basically just rounds our Nibiru and Droll count up to 3 each. And a lot of times I sided in the 3rd Nibiru. There were a few times where I sided in the 3rd Droll too. Like, don't get me wrong, it definitely comes up. The Lancias were probably the card that I sided in the most for the monsters, at least. For the monsters, the Lancia came in a lot. And the Lancia is the reason that I won that Dino game in such a dominating fashion. Like, game 2, he just had all cards in his hand that banish, and the Lancia just shuts that off. Token Collector, in theory, is good. It's just that I didn't play against any Sword Soul, so the card didn't do anything for me, and it stayed in my side deck all day. Moving on to the spells, we have 3 Chalice and 3 Dark Ruler. The Chalices came up a lot. The Dark Ruler, I drew it once, and I should have played it, but for whatever reason, I didn't play it, and I kind of am kicking myself for that, but, like, it happens. It probably would have guaranteed a game 3 for me, but, like, I can't get too mad. Like, mistakes are going to happen. Like, it's just the way that the game works. But the Chalice was, hands down, like, the best card. Against the Lyra-Lust player in game 2, I Chalice their Utopia XYZ and the Ensemble Robin, and they just, like, had no other plays. So I just played entirely through their board just with double Chalice in my opening hand, which is nuts. Then the last card that we played in the side deck, 3 copies of Twin Twister. As we all know, there is a very strong necessity to find ways to out back row, and Twin Twister definitely gets the job done in that respect. The only thing that really sucks is that, like a lot of my deck today, I don't think I resolved Twin Twister once. This card did not come up. I had the weirdest tournament of my entire life, and I did pretty well. It's just that the stuff that I was playing against, it's like I didn't have to do a lot of the normal things that you would think you have to do. It was a very odd event. I did, you know, very, very well, but so many things about it just feel so weird. I'm looking through my deck and I'm going, oh, I didn't use that. I didn't use that. I hardly used this. I hardly used that. So that part is obviously, it is what it is. It's all just chance and luck, whether it's good or bad. But the Twin Twisters in theory is fantastic. Moving forward, I want to try and make it so my hand trap ratios in the side deck are more of like just 3 ofs rather than, you know, having a few 2 ofs and 1 ofs to finish and round up the remainder of, you know, hand trap ratios from my main deck. So I'm gonna have to toy around with this a little bit and see what I can figure out. I almost want to main deck Lancias. I feel like that's not a bad idea, but we'll see. We'll see as time progresses and the meta develops too. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. Obviously, don't forget to smash that subscribe button, turn notification bell on so you know when I upload more cool and awesome content, just like the deck profile that you just watched. But for right now, this is Team Yuki Fails signing out.